What's happening, YouTube? Jonathan Pariente, Execution 10 here, coming at you guys with another video. I want to ask you guys to please continue to check and subscribe to my channel for more YouTube videos. So, the trade deadline is over, and the Yankees did not make a move. Stunning a little bit. Shocked a little bit. And I guess the question many Yankee fans have is why? Why did Brian Cashman not make any moves, particularly where the Yankees needed them, particularly starting pitching, particularly maybe a little bullpen help would have helped, but he stood pat and did nothing. Meanwhile, other teams around were wheeling and dealing. The big one was Houston taking Zack Greinke. So once again, in 2 years, Houston at the last minute took two pitchers off the market that could have been Yankees that now are going to be playing for Houston, possibly playing for a second World Series. Verlander in 2017 and now Greinke in 2019. But here's where I have to look at Cashman here. And every Yankee fan is probably going to be blowing up at him. I'm not saying that Yankee fans have no right to be upset. They should. I'm going to ask you guys to comment on what I'm about to say here, and I'm actually going to take the side of this might have been a good thing the Yankees did not make a move. Because to be very honest, aside from Greinke, who did you really trust that was going to be an ace for this Yankees staff out of what was available on this market? Marcus Stroman, yeah, okay, he's from New York. It's one thing to be from New York. It's another thing to pitch in New York. And just because Stroman is this bundle of joy, he's energetic, he's passionate, which I love, doesn't mean that mentality will translate to New York just because he's from there. Not to mention going on Twitter and bragging about he can't wait to go to New York probably didn't sit well with the Yankee management. Then you look at Syndergaard. You know, as much as Syndergaard has great stuff, he already had his problems with the Mets. He didn't even like pitching he didn't even want to pitch in Syracuse to begin the season when the Mets debuted over there. And trust me, if Syndergaard was on the Yankees, he would have had a lot more. The veterans would have done a lot more than just take a plate of food he was eating and throw it in the garbage. Oh, no. And not to mention, Syndergaard would have had to chop those long blonde locks for his hair. Ugh, no way. Off his hair. Forget that. Robbie Ray had control issues, which I guess was fair. Walks too many guys, and the Yankees really weren't looking for that. The only other move the Yankees could have maybe made was for Trevor Bauer, which I would have loved. But then after he flung a ball in the stands out of anger because of, he gave up a bad hit, suddenly you wonder how well, does he let pressure get to him a little too much? These are the things you have to look at for the Yankees here, and this is why the Yankees didn't make a move. Because as I said, you have to be able to handle pitching in New York, not just go to New York as a guy on another team. When you pitch for New York, not only are you carrying expectations, you have to be able to handle pressure. You have to not let things get to you. And you also have to display unquestionable maturity. And I'm sorry to say, but Stroman, Syndergaard, Bauer, as great as they are, all three of them did not pass that test of being able to handle pitching on the Bronx side of New York, not in Queens, in the Bronx, where you really have the world watching you. So, as I look at this now, and I kind of say to myself, well, was this a blessing in disguise? I think it kind of was. Yankees did not want to part with their big prospects, which is which I think would have been a mistake if they did. Davy Garcia is already showing stuff where he could maybe be a starter one day down the road. Maybe the Yankees could even call him up this year, which would be great. So you want to see what you have in him, and you don't want to just trade him away and then he becomes successful somewhere else. Gleyber Torres was who a lot of teams were asking from the Yankees, particularly seeing how desperate they were and they needed pitching. But you're going to move a 22-year-old starter that's blossomed before the Yankees' very eyes, and then you're just going to trade him just to get a starter that maybe can only last you a couple years, and you may have to deal with free agency again. You're losing a lot when you do it. Sometimes you can be successful with the moves you don't make. Not always about the moves you do make. Not to mention also, a lot of the pitchers, besides what I mentioned, they could have gone to the Yankees, but the other ones were on the Yankees no-trade list. Mad Bum was on the no-trade. Greinke was definitely on a no-trade list to the Yanks. He doesn't like to play in New York, so he wasn't going to go to New York. Even when Verlander could have been available 2 years ago, he didn't want to play in New York. Mike Minor was not on the Yankees trade list. He didn't want to play in New York. So you kind of see how tied Cashman's hands were a little bit. But then you go back to the offseason where the Yankees could have made a move. Patrick Corbin was out there. The Yankees didn't take him. And he was a New York native. Loves the Yanks. But they didn't take him. But I think in a way, the Yankees were still a little bit haunted by when they did acquire a big pitcher to an extent, and they gave up a chunk of the farm to get him, and he didn't pan out. You might have heard of him. His name was Sonny Gray. Well, now since he's gone to the Reds, he's blossomed there. Kind of gone back to the Sonny Gray of old. So I guess you kind of have to ask yourself, well, where do the Yankees go from here? Because right now they're living on the hope that Dellin Betances, Luis Severino, Jonathan Loaizaga, Jordan Montgomery, all those arms that are hurt, you're praying they come back and they don't go down again. Now here's some pros and cons. Obviously, if you get Betances back and you get Loaizaga, that's good for your bullpen. I mean, that'll definitely further shorten innings for the Yankees to win a game, knowing what they got in the bullpen. Severino, though, unless the Yankees really decide to bring him all the way back, he'll only throw about 75 pitches with the amount of time they have, so they won't really be able to build him up to being a starter for the rest of this year. So if anything, Severino could maybe be at least a bulk guy out of the bullpen. So if the Yankees, let's say, were to go to an opener like Green for 2 innings, and maybe you go to Sevy for about 3 or 4 innings, and then the rest of the way you go Ottavino, Britton, Betances, yada yada, and just close the game out with Chapman, that works. But right now, the Yankees have to really take a look at what they're going to do going forward here, because the injuries have been up and down with this team. Seems like every other month or so, about 2-3 guys get hurt, a couple guys come back, then a couple more guys get hurt again. That's been the story of the Yankees this year, and yet they've weathered the storm using what they've had in the minors. And that's what Cashman's banking on. Because of how this team's been able to persevere through all the hurdles that have been thrown at them, that makes the Yankees probably a little more battle-tested than any of the other teams right now that are going for the playoff spots that they are. Because for the most part, the other teams around the Yankees, yes, they've had injuries, but not to the extent of where almost their whole lineup went down in one shot. The Yankees, for about 2 months, had to rely on a team of minor leaguers just to stay afloat. And to their credit, they were winning games anyway. And not with home runs, but playing fundamental baseball. Then the guys came back, the guys from the minors went down, and then the Yankees went back to their old ways of the long ball. But they found some gems, and this is where Cashman deserves a little credit. I mean, Little Craig deserves a lot of credit. He picked up some guys off the scrap heap that nobody took a chance on, but the Yanks did as far as hitting was concerned. Cameron Maybin, nobody saw him hitting 300 for the Yanks this year. Gio Urshela, absolutely nobody saw coming that he was going to hit 300 and hit line drives. Remember, Urshela was a 220 hitter. Mike Tauchman came out of nowhere. Nobody thought Tauchman was going to do anything. With Gardner hurt, Tauchman's been actually hitting since Gardner has been on the IL. He'll be back tomorrow. He'll be back in 2 days for the Red Sox series, Will Gardner. So the question then will be what happens with Tauchman. So the Yanks have really had to maneuver around with what they've had in the minors to what they have on their staff. They've even gone to the opener with Chad Green, which is something they had never done this year. And so far, going to the opener, they've been undefeated. I want to go back to something I want to go talk about something that, like kind of relating to what the Yankees decided to do at the trade deadline. And I go back to something Herb Brooks did in 1980. And I'm hoping and I'm feeling this could bode true for the Yankees this year. When Herb Brooks was putting together his hockey team, but would go on to win the 1980 Olympic Games in Lake Placid. I watched this in Miracle too, but what was in Miracle was true. Herb Brooks was watching players in practice. Basically, they brought down some of the best amateur players throughout the whole United States. They were supposed to be there for a week in Colorado. And while they were all doing their practice in one day, Herb Brooks had already finalized his roster to 26 players, eventually having to get it down to 20. His assistant coach, Craig Patrick, was looking at Herb like, you're kidding me, this is the final roster? Herb didn't even hesitate. Yes. And of course, Herb Brooks was ridiculed for that decision. His higher-ups were looking at Herb like he was crazy. Saying, how do you know your team? But Herb Brooks basically said those players were all chosen for a specific reason. He's watched a lot of them, coached a lot of them, scouted them. And when Coach Patrick even said to Herb, you're missing some of the best players, Herb said a very vital line. I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the right ones. Think about that for just a moment with the trade deadline with the Yanks. They were looking for players. And definitely there were some players you'd say were the best out there, but not in the mind of the Yankees. They felt like they don't want to ruin the chemistry they have. Getting one of those guys would mean losing a few of the guys that they have. And unless the Yankees really felt like they have a strong chemistry with the team they got this year, and they feel like this team has something very special about it, which I have seen for most of the year, I think they do, then maybe the Yankees have something special about them that maybe people don't know. Maybe there's more that they're letting on to than maybe the fans or the critics think. But I'll end the note with this. I know Yankee fans aren't happy with the decision Cashman made to not make a trade. But I guess you kind of have to say this, and you know what? We'll have to back in with this. We'll have to back Cashman with this now. Got to trust what he's doing, because I'm sure as many Yankee fans are going to say, they sure in hell hope Cashman knows what he's doing by not jumping on opportunities when he had them. Because for sure, The Yankees will probably see Houston in the playoffs again, facing their 1, 2, 3 starters. The question will be, if it is Yankees-Astros in the championship series, will the Yankees prevail? We're going to find out now. Final 50-plus games to go in the season. Where will the Yankees go in 2019 by not making a move? Does this hurt the Yankees, or it will not bother them? We'll see. Jonathan Perriente, The Education 10, saying bye for now.